And we're also, I mean, there's the COVID, like you said, COVID lockdown, in addition to an economy that was already suffering because of, hyperinflation coming sooner and sooner because of all the things that we've talked about, the Fed and with central banking, and then shutting people's businesses down. And then at the same time, all of that sort of stoking division that we've seen happening in the last months. And then to me, that leads me to this next story here, because I think that as we've talked about in recent weeks and really over the last almost 10 years now, that every time there's an election, it's a great time to divide the people. It's a great time to just keep people fighting over, this time it's Biden and Trump, and they're tweeting this at each other, and they're saying it's so much garbage. And with all that in the background, we've got talk of a second wave coming, potentially a second wave of coronavirus that, as we said earlier, is questionable. We've got talk of, multiple mentions of this phrase, dark winter. And as we've said on this show, dark winter was a military exercise happened in the past having to do with anthrax, and just that terminology is being thrown around. And then at the same time, I just caught this one in the last week. The Department of Homeland Security puts out a report saying that there is a potential for an electromagnetic pulse, EMP attack, as the election nears. And as this is coming from Activist Post, and just as I said a moment ago, Activist Post editors, they wrote a recent interview with Whitney Webb and Ryan of The Last American Vagabond. I think that's an important one. We'll link to that because it talks about this concept of dark winter and the fact that, as we said on this show, Cybereason, an Israeli intelligence firm, did simulations where they said that the elections are going to get canceled and all kinds of crazy things. And I just want everybody hearing this on KPFT and on the internet, all the places we're live right now, to really think about the potential for what's coming, knowing that we know things like Event 201 and all this sort of stuff. When you're looking back and you're like, oh, if only we'd known that they were simulating this beforehand, maybe I would have done something differently. I don't know. But the U.S. Department of Homeland Security just recently released a new report warning about the potential for an EMP attack on the U.S. This was released on Thursday, September 3rd, about 60 days until the presidential election on November 3rd, and says that there are, quote, evolving threats against the American homeland, most recently highlighting efforts to combat an EMP attack which could disrupt the electrical grid and potentially damage electronics. The department released an EMP status report via the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency that says that, quote, key actions to address be seen if this is a damage to the nation's electrical grid. A senior official performing the duties of deputy secretary said EMP attacks are part of the emerging threats against our nation and demand a response. This is why DHS is taking these contingencies very seriously, working diligently to mitigate our risks and equipping our state and local partners with the resources they need to do the same. And so to combat these emerging threats, last year, March 2019, Trump signed an executive order delegating the power to the White House for EMP preparedness. So this, they're talking about there could be a cyber Pearl Harbor if the United States or if China tried to attack the United States' electric grid. So that's sort of one recent thing. And then this other one I'll just add here, and then I'm done for tonight. But I think this is equally important. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, the CEO of Facebook, one of the platforms we're live on right now, recently gave an interview on Axios, which is on HBO, saying that the election could take up to weeks afterwards to determine who actually wins, and that this could cause civil unrest, but that the people need to get used to this. This was on a recent appearance again on Axios on HBO. Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg says that his company and other media should work to convince.
Get used to civil unrest?
Yeah, get used to civil unrest, and that basically, I mean, they're essentially saying that they have to convince the public. I'm just going to read his quote so people know we're not taking anything out of context. This is exactly what Zuckerberg said. One of the things that I think we and other media need to start doing is preparing the American people. And he says that there's nothing illegitimate about this election taking additional days or even weeks to make sure that all the votes are counted in. That may be important to be sure that it is a legitimate and fair election. And he said that they will, quote, use a bunch of different messaging around that just so people know that that's normal. And they also explained, this is kind of a new announcement about Facebook's policies related to the election, that, quote, if one of the candidates in any of the races claims victory before there's a consensus result, then we're going to add some informational context to the post directly saying that there's no consensus result yet. So like if Trump or whoever declares like they're going to have a victory and, you know, the media and Facebook have decided that that's not the truth yet, then they're going to add, you know, some little disclaimer or something on
What a strange bunch of predictions.
Yeah, and then listen to this. He goes, I think that this is important because there is unfortunately, I think, a heightened risk of civil unrest in the period between voting and a result being called or after that. I just think that we need to be doing everything we can to reduce the chances of violence or civil unrest in the wake of this election. And the reason I bring that up, in addition to the DHS warning, but I want to remind you guys that in addition, there's just so many like war game simulations happening right now. We got the DHS warning about EMP attack. We got the Cyber Reason Israeli intelligence company saying that smart cars were going to be used to crash into voters and cancel the elections. Now, this is a totally different war game where John Podesta, who many of you will know was Hillary Clinton's chairperson of her campaign, top Democrat, he was a part of this simulation. And in the simulation, he played Joe Biden. And as him playing Joe Biden, he basically said that they were going to contest the election results and that they were planning a second inauguration in California. And this ultimately almost led the country to the brink of civil war until the military had to get involved and take sides. And this became such a big deal that in the last couple of days, one of the top generals in the military, his name is Milley, I can't find his first name, basically put out a statement saying that he believes, he's one of the top commanders, saying that in the event of a dispute over some aspect of the elections, by law, U.S. courts and U.S. Congress are required to resolve the disputes, not the U.S. military. So I don't know what the heck's coming up, guys, but I'm just putting this out there because this is just so much coming out around election night and around where it's going, and civil unrest and potential attacks on the grid. And I mean, I don't know. And then you got all these characters involved, it doesn't sit right with me.
No, it's quiet. It's too quiet.
You gotta remember, you just
like
these threats from the DHS with the EMP, but it was the DHS that said thousands of people were streaming across the border. So like you don't know which sources to trust, which sources not to trust, and you basically just gotta trust in something you believe and work on things. I don't doubt that it's a crazy, scary world, but whoo! And I will say this though about the elections, they're taking weeks to figure out is, Congress, you got like two houses and one can pick, one will go one way and one will go the other. And it'll be like, oh, Congress, the House backs Biden, but the Senate backs Trump. And it'll be, you see what I'm saying? If there's a really split, it'll go like think that far. And that'll help, galvanize even more.
Yeah, I think it's ultimately about just dividing people, and we've been saying this, man. Like, I just don't see either side just sort of walking away peacefully. Okay, well, Biden lost. We'll just deal with Trump for 4 more years. Or the other side, okay, well, Biden, won. We'll just accept that.
I mean, what about the other side of those two? Like, where the coin even has 3 sides. Like, come on, there's more than just Biden and Trump, y'all. I hope that y'all recognize that, not just your lives, but even more on the ballot. Mickey Mouse, you could write Mickey Mouse, and that's more than Biden and Trump. I'm just saying.
I mean, they've also connected coronavirus issues to this divide, so it could all just kind of like blend in with the no masks, and all that stuff. I don't know.
It really does feel like a perfect storm of things colliding.
An excuse to hit somebody, and there's been people shot, and now is just the time to see through the right and left paradigm more than ever. Now's the time to, take care of yourself and your family. And if they're saying EMP, then I mean, shit, maybe buy some batteries. Like, I don't know, try to figure out some solutions and take their threats halfway serious, because they could pick one. I don't know.
I think you hit on to something that they kind of tried to ridicule for a few times, and that's just being prepared. It's ridiculous not to be prepared. That's why nobody has any money saved, and they all living on credit and stuff. So I think that's the best thing we can do now in these uncertain times, is think about what really matters, food and shelter and loved ones and such, and security, right? So I think that we can turn things around by, starting to manage that a little bit.
And I was also trying to remember when I was talking to my parents the other day that, like, a lot of these people are a vocal minority, and they're pandering to this extremism, and the news likes to make people seem like there's more participants in this army of left and army of right, when a lot of us really are in the center, and a lot of us don't want war. And, it's going to be more rational minds just trying not to get torn in half one way or another.
Yeah, I like one of the comments said that they're trying to start a war between us or something along those lines, and I think that's really true of what's going on, you know. And like you said, Micah, it doesn't have to be a bad thing to be somebody who's prepared. You know, that became now you're a doomsday prepper, you're this or that. But the point is trying to think ahead and really at this point, knowing everything we know that has happened, the amount of events that have happened that then after the fact we look back and see like, oh, look at these weird coincidences of people, you know, taking stocks out or buying certain stocks, or, you know, people moving money around, or you know, simulations and exercises that happened. You know, it's just, I think it's a good idea to be prudent. That's the only reason I bring up these stories, is not to say like freak out, you know, there's going to be a false flag, because at the end of the day, none of us sitting here know for certain. But I do know there's a lot of weird predictions about what's going to happen in the election. There's a lot of amping up of it's the end of democracy and what's going to happen if Trump doesn't, you know, leave office and things of that sort. You know, it's just a good idea to be thinking solutions and how you can survive without being dependent on these various systems.